we're going to move on to our Seeing It Your Way piece. And this week, we're going to hear from someone who has experienced how technology has been able to help her through education, through employment, and in her social life as well. This week's guest is Petrina Finn. So let's listen to this week's Seeing It Your Way. So this week, we're delighted to have Petrina Finn with us for our Seeing It Your Way piece. You're very welcome, Petrina.
Thank you very much, Jude.
So, Petrina, maybe you can just give us a little bit of your background. Tell us a little bit about your story.
Right, well, I'm Petrina and I'm 52 years of age now, and I was diagnosed with RP when I was 6 years of age. At the time, my parents were told I'd be blind by the time I was 20. So I was sent to St Mary's School for Visually Impaired Girls in Merrion when I was 10, and I went and completed my Leaving Cert there. When I was in school in Dublin, like, I was a boarder, and I went home at weekends. The main thing I learned there was Braille. So I went to college in London then when I was 19. And I studied physiotherapy, and I worked in Liverpool for about 2 years, and I came home then, and then I started working in Louth. I got a permanent job there, and I stayed in that particular job in different roles with the St John of God's for about 26 years. I worked full time up till, we'd say, my second child was born, and then I worked like a 4-day week. So I've always worked until last year. I always worked. My eyesight would have got worse sort of gradually, but I would have noticed it maybe if I went somewhere that I hadn't been for maybe a year or two, and I go, oh God, I used to be able to see that, and found out then I was starting to get sort of not doing things. Like, I would have had night blindness, and when the kids were small I wouldn't have gone out at night with the kids, but I would have just worked my life around that, so sort of didn't really realise how my eyesight was impacting me, till sort of one day I stopped and looked. I had a significant deterioration in 2005 following surgery. Now, it was routine surgery, but just a couple of weeks later I had a significant deterioration, which was quite traumatic, to be honest with you.
Sure.
So I had, my eyesight obviously must have been getting a little bit worse, because I had organised to go down to the Irish Guide Dogs for the Blind to learn cane training for a week. So I went off and I did that, but I still sort of was in a bit of denial about my eyesight, sort of. I came home after, now bear in mind we 3 young children, and I went off for a week's holiday down to Cork, basically, sort of, and I came home and I promptly folded the stick up and put it in my handbag, and that's where it stayed for a little while, much to my husband's disgust, sort of. But then I started, sort of taking it out, and I wouldn't use it on the street. I wouldn't use it in familiar surroundings, we'd say, like my own town, but I'd use it in Dublin, no bother, that way.
Yes,
so, I adapted to it. I went down in the March. I really didn't use the cane, and I didn't find it that useful, because I think I thought I'd use the cane and everything would be magically rosy in the garden, sort of. It wasn't a magic wand, sort of, that I thought it was going to be. So then I decided to get a guide dog, and I got a guide dog fairly quickly afterwards. So then that was the turning point. I mean, I just thought the guide dog was just absolutely fabulous. I couldn't get over how much freedom I had with the guide dog, how easy, how confident I felt walking, how, like, I didn't realise, like, my posture even, and as a physiotherapist, you think I would have known, but my posture had gone right down, sort of when I used cane or walking without the cane, because I was so scared of falling or whatever. To be able to get out independently on my own and stomp the ground, and what I had to say and what I didn't have to say, and by the time I came home it was all out in my system, so it was grand.
Oh, very good. So that's really interesting. So you were using, at this stage, the cane, you had the guide dog. Now, just bring us up to date a little bit more now. Last year, I believe you had another bit of a kind of a setback.
Yes, I did. So then it's sort of, my eyesight would have stayed stable for gradually went back to sort of gradual sort of, but last year, well, actually 2018 we had the fly here in Drogheda, and then 2019 with the fly here in Drogheda as well. But I noticed a huge difference in my eyesight and how I was able to manage to get around in crowds and, recognise people and sort of stuff like that. I could see a huge difference in it. And in 2018, my consultant had said, look, your eyesight is getting worse. But, and he said, did you ever think of taking early retirement? And I was like, going, is he for real? Like, sort of, you have a mortgage and that, like, as well, So I sort of, but I mean, in hindsight, it stuck my head in the sand, sort of, and so in 2019, the fly was on, and it's, oh my God, my eyesight really has got worse, And then I was finding work quite difficult. I travelled a lot with work, and I travelled a lot. I did a lot of home visits. I did a lot of things. Now, there was reasonable accommodation put in place for me, and my colleagues in that were very mindful of my visual impairment, and we'd tactics ourselves, we'll put it that way, sort of that, sort of we would have used in the workplace. And but I just found it was just getting too difficult, and I was up with the consultant again. He mentioned retiring. By this time, I'd done my homework, sort of from a financial point of view, from my pension, and I decided that it was just too dangerous for me to work, really. So I took early retirement on sick grounds.
So tell us a bit then, just kind of moving towards technology. Have you always been a bit of a techie? Have you got a kind of a bit of...
At all.
Right, okay.
Necessity is the mother of invention. I only learned a bit I need to use, and that would be that, sort of.
Yeah.
Sort of got dragged and kicking into I used to lecture in college, and it took me, the way years ago, maybe in the 90s, you'd have acetates that you'd put up in a projector on the, it took me years to get past that, and I came in one day all delighted with myself with a floppy disk, and your man said, oh God, I haven't seen one. It's usually, the memory sticks weak. I was going like, oh my God.
Technology and you wouldn't have been the best of friends.
No. And I mean, I learned it for work, and sort of like used it as much as whatever. What I did do though, in regards to technology, when my eyesight in about 2005, I went off and I did, because I hadn't the ICDL done at all. I did it was called the ECDL at the time. I did the ECDL up in Finglas with a girl called Paula Darrington and Gus Darrington, and I basically learned it through JAWS,
Yes.
So even though I could still see the screen and use the screen, I learned how to use the screen reader, and it was, if I had any advice for anybody, that would be that: go and get your technology, sort of before you actually are forced to have to use it, so that you can become familiar with it. So that was a great course. That was brilliant. I went off and did like a postgrad after doing that, and I wouldn't have been able to do my postgrad without having that level of technology, sort of. So that was the first bit of technology. The second bit of technology, which I found brilliant again in 2005, was the speech on your phone for reading texts. Oh my God, that was like a door opened into happiness for me, sort of. Because what was happening was, now at the old Nokia phone, sort of going back years ago, when it was like the screen was like pages, sort of like, sort of, and I used to be there trying to read, sort of the script, and I couldn't read the text, and if somebody sent me a joke, I'd lose the joke halfway through because I'd just get tired reading, so the whole thing would, so I used to be often then just saying to my daughter, who was 12 at the time, here, just read that text, will you? So I got the speech on. At the time, you had to go and, it's not like nowadays that it's inbuilt in the phone. You had to go and get put specially on a particular phone. So I went off and did all that, and God, it was brilliant. It was absolutely brilliant, sort of being able to read text, send texts, sort of, so the voiceover on the phone, and now I have an iPhone with the voiceover on it, and it's just, I actually couldn't be without it, to be honest with you, So that's the two, and again, I used them before I read, again, like the Jaws, I learned how to use it before I really had to use it, that way?
Which sort of stood you in good stead then.
Oh yeah, because then when I actually did, it was fine. I wasn't having to learn a new skill, so so that Absolutely. Was that.
It's incredible, actually, just as you're talking there, just to think of like the fact that you were using JAWS quite a bit, you were using the speech on mobile phones quite a bit, and this is going back quite a way. So even though a lot of the technology we have now has refined that a lot, and there's of course newer things as well, those are still massive parts of accessible technology, and they've been there for a good while.
Sort of, because I actually remember being up in the National Council of the Blind around 2006 or 7, and with somebody who was in the technology department, and there was a student with her, and she was saying, what does the speech mean to you? And I was saying, it's opened a whole new world, sort of, it's just, and brought me up to speed with my peers, sort of like, because everybody else was texting, so I had to learn it. I should be able to text, sort of, and that's how, and I have a group of friends, and the only way we sort of communicate is through WhatsApp, sort of texting one another. So I'd be lost, if I didn't have that,
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, the social implications of it. It's not even just the educational or the independence. It's a social sort of thing as well,
Yeah. Obviously, with something like a smartphone now, just the fact that it can talk to you is a big part of it. But has there been any particular apps that you've found very useful? Anything that you've tried?
Well, the Beat My Eyes app is great. I downloaded that there last year. I only found out about it around this time last year. I only found out about it, the Be My Eyes app. So that's where there's volunteers on the other end of a phone that, if you ring up, you can ask them a certain question or whatever. So for instance, the other day, I have, because I take medication every day, but one of the pallets, is that what you call it? The blister packs had fallen out of the box into the bag, and I didn't know which. I had to take one of one and two of another, so I didn't know which one it was. Now I have a magnifier, and I could have went downstairs, got me magnifier, and scrutinised the thing, and after a few minutes found out which one it was. But I just said to myself, oh God, do you know what? I'll do that, Be My Eyes. So I rang her. I held up the phone. I held up the blister pack in front of the phone so she could read, the back of the blister pack. And I said, could you tell me what that medication is? And she said, it's X, Y, and Z. And I said, that's brilliant. Thanks very much. And within a matter of seconds, I didn't even have to get me bum off the bed, sort of thing. So another time I dropped my phone and it was on silent. No, it must have been dead actually, because it wasn't vibrating either. I tried to ring it from my landline, couldn't find it because, sort of, and I knew it was up in the bedroom. I just knew it was there. So I got my iPad and I rang the Be My Eyes, and I went around the room sort of strategically left to right. And then she said, just hoping that there was no filth on the floor or something, that it was sort of semi-clean, and, sort of, and I went round the room and then she said, stop. And I went to start, and she said, it's actually underneath that bag, you know, sort of.
Yes.
And it had slid underneath, underneath. So I had a bag of clothes sitting there, and it slid underneath there. So, funny story about the Be My Eyes is, Chantel up in the National Council for the Blind told me about it, and I said, oh God, when I go home I'll download that. God, that sounds a great app. And I left the National Council for the Blind. I went up to Drumcondra and was standing waiting on my bus. And this girl came and said to me, what bus number are you waiting on? And I said, no, I'm waiting on a coach, you know. And she said, did you ever hear of the Be My Eyes app? She said, I'm a volunteer, she said. And I said, you wouldn't believe it. I only heard about it today. And so that was mad. So then I went home and I was telling my daughter, who's 28, and she says, oh, I'll sign up for that. So she signed up. As she was signing up as a volunteer, I was signing up as a user, you know. And they must have sent her an email and said it'll be a month before you get a call or whatever. And so she just thought, oh, that's grand. The next morning she came down and she said, oh my God, ma'am. She said, it's mad. She said, this girl rang me from London. She said, I got my first call with Be My Eyes. This girl was in Euston Station in London and was saying, what platform is the train going to? Essex, we'd say, or whatever. And she was holding up her phone, and my daughter said, just move over to the right slightly. And she said, it's on platform 4. And the one said, thanks very much. And off she went. So mad. It's brilliant app. So that's a good one. I'm just trying to look to see what else I have on my phone here. I joined the NCBI library the last week or the week before. And oh my God, I am in my element. My next purchase in life is going to be, you know, those bone, one of the lads was telling me about them, the bone conductors earphones you put behind your ears, so that at least you can still hear here and you can hear that, you know. So they're going to be my next purchase. Very good. And then recently, as in last week, I only brought an Amazon Fire Stick, which has audio description on a lot of, audio description is absolutely, mine even watch, like, do you know new DVDs and that come out, they all have audio description, and like if we're watching a film together, we'd have mine even would put the audio description on, I don't have to be there, do you know, that way sort of, they like it so much, do you know, it's brilliant because like you miss so much, do you know, sort of nuances, do you know, sort of, when somebody comes into the room on the telly and you're going, who's that, you know, they're going, shh, everybody else, shh, you're missing the point, man, you know, sort of, and what else, and I've gone to audio descriptive plays, we'd say, like in the Gaiety or in the what's that one called? The Board Gosh. I went to Les Mis, audio described in the Board Gosh there last year. Fantastic. You know, sort of. We went over to Hamilton in London. We sat in the door, and I seen that audio described. It was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Yeah. So.
It's really interesting just hearing from you, Petrina. Just as you said earlier, you weren't really into technology, and yet at this point, technology is kind of all pervasive, and it's doing so much for you.
Yeah, like, you know, sort of, as I said, I'd be selective, you know, sort of in what I only use what I need to use, you know, sort of thing. But I wouldn't have, even the thing Siri on your phone, like, that's just brilliant as well, you know, sort of, so technology, but it's brilliant. Even like I have to purchase a weighing scales, like a kitchen weighing scales, talking kitchen weighing scales, but I have a bathroom talking weighing scales, and that's great. You know, I can weigh myself in the privacy of my bathroom and nobody knows what weight I am, you know, which would be, you know, sort of, I know I'm making a lot but I don't want anyone else knowing me weight. Thanks very much. Exactly. I don't want to be standing on weighing scales and saying to one of my kids, what way am I there? You know, sort of thing.
Absolutely.
Yes,
it's a good point. It's interesting just hearing all of those different elements of technology. If you were to kind of step back from that a little bit now and just, as opposed to the specifics of technology, if you were to describe the overall effect that using these pieces of accessible technology has had on your general life, how would you describe that effect?
Just it's just maintained my independence and kept me. It's kept me independent. It's, as I said, like, I can read my own way myself now. I can, use the phone. That way I don't have to be showing off and text to other people. So it's kept, like, I like my privacy. I like my privacy even among my own family, let alone, outsiders. So it's kept me having me privacy at the level I want to have it, as opposed to having to have it, if that makes sense. It's also kept me on a par with my peers, and I'm talking about sighted peers, my colleagues, my friends, sort of. It's kept me on a pair. As I said, there's one group of us that we mainly we meet up every 3 or 4 months. We used to work together, but we mainly communicate via WhatsApp. And if I couldn't read texts, and some of them texts aren't for other people to read, if I couldn't read texts, I'd be completely out of that loop. So I'd be completely socially isolated from those,
Yes.
So it's kept that sort of level. As I said, the JAWS on the computer and learning the ECDL and that, I was able to go off and do a postgrad. I wouldn't have been able to do that without, because when I studied when I first qualified as a physio in 1990, all of your work was sort of transcript, is written up on a typewriter, whereas then by the time I went back to do my postgrad in 2008, everything was Dropbox, everything was emailed off, everything was research on Google Scholar and all of that. I wouldn't have been able to do that without the technology that's around, So therefore my job prospects would have been limited. The other thing I was saying to you about earlier on was about Braille, that I learned. I also learned typing when I was in Marion, which is great, like, because I actually see colleagues and friends who still type with one finger, and I just to be looking at them going, oh my God, that's mad. The iPhone now, you can enable it to Braille, so you can use the screen as a Braille, as a screen away mode, and it's a Braille machine, so 6 dots for the Braille. So I used to dictate some of my texts, but the iPhone Siri couldn't really understand me loud accent, so sometimes it picks up funny things, sort of say funny things, and then you'd be listening back to the text and going, oh my God, sick, I do it again. Whereas now I actually type out most of my stuff through Braille now, and I have it done in a matter of minutes, and you can do it discreetly with the Braille.
Well,
I can have it sitting under the table and I can Braille away, sort of thing. And if I have, my earphone, sort of just one earphone in my ear, sort of, and I can Braille away to my heart's content. It's great,
Yeah, so very good. So I'm just interested in one of the things you said earlier. You mentioned that if you were to give somebody advice, it would be to kind of start learning the technology before you absolutely have to depend on it, and that's a great piece of advice. Is there any other advice that you'd give somebody who's maybe coming to terms with sight loss? Maybe they've actually sort of had sight loss for a period of time, but maybe they're starting to get involved with technology now. Any particular advice that you'd give somebody who's starting off on that track?
Well, I'd say go off and get as much training as you can, sort of, like I'm revisiting the ECDL at the minute, sort of, so go off and get as much training as you can in it. Speak to others, get involved. There's peer groups around and there's technology groups around. Get involved with others to get information. Like I wouldn't have known about the Be My Eyes app, only I heard about it through the National Council for the Blind, sort of. Yeah. The other thing is as well is take advantage of the work adaptation grant. There is a work adaptation grant available. And we'd say, for instance, I have a Ruby XL Magnum, a little tiny, it's about 6 inches, 7 inches, that I use just to have a look at. We'd say like that if there was something written and to read it quickly or whatever. I wouldn't read a book with it now, that way, because again, I have to have it so big, that you lose sort of the the fluidness of it, and it's easier to read audiobooks now, but I got that originally through the work adaptation grant, so again, there are, if people don't have, we'd say, medical cards, or if they're working, sort of, and if they don't have sort of feel they don't have entitlements, that's one that they can get in to help them in the workplace.
Yeah, very good. Well, there's some brilliant, very practical advice there, Petrina, and certainly really interesting to hear your experience and the variety of technology that you use in everyday life as well. We appreciate you talking to us today, Petrina.
That's great, Jude. Thanks very much.